Well, welcome to the Impactus podcast. I'm Dean Brenton, and we are here to equip you as men for a life of purpose and godly impact. So, is men's ministry a relic of the past or relevant for today? How can ministry to men be effective and attractive for guys? And how can we disciple men and help them to become disciple makers? You know, we love equipping local churches and leaders in their ministry to men. And today I am so glad to have the men's ministry legend, Steve Sonderman, on the podcast with us. Steve is highly regarded as one of the pioneers of the men's ministry movement in America. He started one of the first ministries in the country for the growing church population at Elmbrook Church in Brookfield, Wisconsin. In 1994, he began the annual No Regrets Men's Conference, which today draws thousands of men across the U.S. and around the world. He's also the founder of the National No Regrets Men's Ministries. He consults widely, training local churches around the world how to create their own dynamic ministry to men. He regularly consults churches on leadership issues and leads seminars helping to develop men's ministries in the U.S. and abroad. He's also authored books on leadership and curriculum studies for men. He has a bachelor degree from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee and a Master of Divinity degree from Bethel Seminary. Steve and his wife, Colleen, have 4 grown children, and they are very proud grandparents. And I'm excited to tell you that Steve is going to be one of our keynote speakers at our virtual Men's Ministry Leadership Summit in September. Check out our website for all the details. You are not going to want to miss it. He is no stranger to this ministry, and it is a real delight to have Steve join us today. You know, it is a privilege to be able to bring you solid biblical and practical content through these podcasts. Now, if you know of a young guy who could use this kind of resource, invite them to check out our Young Men's podcast as well. And we'd be really grateful if you would subscribe and share our podcast. And leave us a review on the platform you use, not for us, but to get more people to experience this content. And if you would like to support the work of this ministry and these podcasts, please head over to impactus.org/give and consider becoming a monthly partner or making a one-time donation to help us continue this vision to see every man become, grow, and live as a disciple of Jesus. And one last thing. The fall of 2023, this fall, will be a significant time for this ministry as we take the next step in the journey toward becoming fully Impactus. We have had a rich heritage as Promise Keepers Canada, and we also believe we have a bright future as an online global ministry to men and for the next generation of men. So follow us on our channels, our website, and get our e-news for all the exciting updates. Well, let's get into today's episode with Steve Sonderman. Well, welcome to the Impactus podcast. Steve, it is so good to have you with us today.
Well, Dean, it's great to be with you, and just have thoroughly enjoyed my time with Impactus over the years, and so appreciative of the work that you guys have done, just consistently ministering to men. So thank you for the opportunity just to talk about ministry to men.
Well, it's great to finally meet you. I've heard your name so many times before, and you are no stranger to this ministry, and you've been a blessing to our audiences and different events that we put off from time to time. So it's great to connect today. So for those that may not know who you are, tell us a little bit about your story, your family, and your current ministry that you're involved in.
Sure, love to do it. So I grew up in Milwaukee. I've been here my entire life, so really haven't moved. Both my wife and I live about a mile from where we grew up. So you can say we are Milwaukee through and through. Of course, that means Packers, Brewers, Bucks, and Badgers are our favorite teams and the games that we attend on a regular basis. I was a pastor for 35 years at Elmbrook Church under the leadership of Stuart Briscoe, and I did college-age ministry for the first 6 years. And then after 6 years, the ministry had grown to literally hundreds and hundreds of college kids. Colleen and I had 4 of our own kids. And so I went to Stuart and I said, Stuart, I am so tired of bus trips, pizza parties, retreats. I said, you got to get me out of here. And I said, I'll do evangelism ministry. I'll do prayer ministry. I'll do assimilation. I'll do missions. I said, you give me any one of those 4 and I'll be a happy camper. And he came back a month later and said, Steve, we want you to do men's ministry. And I looked and I said, Stuart, that's not on my list. I said, I've never worked with a man in my life. I said, what in the world will I do with men? And he said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to do the very same thing you did with the college kids. Just try to act a little bit more mature. So that's basically been it. For the next 29, 30 years at Elmbrook, I was the men's ministry pastor. Started in the early 90s. Probably, as far as we can tell, probably the first full-time pastor responsible for men's ministry in the country. There was men's ministry going on, obviously, but not a pastor designated. I was calling around trying to figure out what to do and couldn't find anyone other than some parachurch organizations. And so that's where I really cut my teeth in ministry to men, was at Elmbrook and just working with the guys there, and really had an incredible run. Just thoroughly enjoyed working with the men. It was during that time that we decided to put on a one-time event called the No Regrets Conference. It was on a Friday night, and it went so well that we thought, well, we should do it another year. Well, this year will be our 31st year. It just keeps on getting better and better. So we just keep on doing it. But really, the heartbeat of what so I'm going to backtrack. So basically, 4 years ago, I came to the point, after being a pastor for 35 years, of saying, you know what, I was at 62 at that time. I thought, I've probably got one more big climb in me, and what do I want to spend these next 5 to 10 years doing? And I decided I want to do men's ministry full time. Because by this time at Elmbrook, I was also over the staff and I was doing so many other things. I wasn't able to do what I just love to do. So in a very positive way, I left Elmbrook. They sort of sent us off, and we started No Regrets Men's Ministry as a separate nonprofit organization, and developed a board, did the funding, the whole 9 yards to get it going. But now for the last 4 years, we've been a separate organization, and really what we do is we do three things. We do our annual conference, which has grown over the years. As we were talking about, we had 130 sites last year, churches, 130 small groups, and then in 35 countries. And so we put that on every year. It's a world-class event. The second thing we do is we do training, and that's our bread and butter. We are constantly just training pastors and high-capacity volunteers on how to more effectively reach men for Jesus. How do you root them in Jesus? How do you release them for kingdom impact and reproduce them as leaders in life? And so we just walk churches through that spiritual pathway and help them develop a ministry to men. And then the third thing we do is we provide discipleship resources. We have a series of studies called Base Camp. It's 8 studies, all online. There's no paper involved, really geared towards the younger man. And these studies are each 6 to 8 weeks long. And we cover all the basics. Just what does it mean to follow Jesus? How do you build your spiritual muscle? What does it mean to be a man today? Marriage, parenting, purpose, influence, faith and work, all the key topics. And so we just really help churches put together an intentional plan to disciple the men of their church. For so many churches, it's hit and miss. When I ask them, what's your plan to make disciples? They say, well, it's organic. That's code for we don't have a plan. And so we're really trying to help them to do that. So those are the 3 big things we do. And then the thing we do is our global ministry. I spend a lot of time overseas. I spent 10 days in Pakistan 2 months ago, working with 150 leaders there, and in Lahore and then Karachi, just helping them understand leadership and leading from the heart and building teams, developing leaders, ministry to men. And then I just got back a couple weeks ago from Zambia, Africa, where we worked with 6 different countries there: Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, South Africa, etc. And again, 150 leaders, just pouring into them for a whole week on how do you minister to men and how do you lead, and just equipping them. So love the international. We have a bunch of trips next year as well, but really it's about training, and that's where I spend my time.
Yeah.
And then I have a family. Colleen and I have been married for it's gonna be 40 years this November, and we've just had a blast. We have 4 adult children, all are married. all over the country. One in Boston, one in Nashville, one in Portland, and one here in Milwaukee. And we have 7 grandchildren as well. So
Oh,
they
wow.
keep us busy. Matter of fact, last week we just got back from vacation, and it was the first time in 3 years that all 17 of us have been together. So we just had a wonderful time out in Colorado. So, anyways, that's just a little bit about me and what I do and what we're about.
Wow, that's so exciting. I can identify with your story because I'm a recovering youth pastor.
Yep.
Work with youth and young adults for 15 or years or so, and then in other leadership roles. And if you had have said to me 5 or 6 years ago I'd be leading some kind of a men's ministry, I probably would have laughed.
Yeah.
But it makes sense. Some of the things that we learned through those days and those times, and how it translates today. And I love how you've taken what started as really an event and it's become a catalyst for so much more to equip the church and men's leaders.
Yeah. Yeah, it really has. I never would have seen it happening. Um, and yet it really, like you said, it's just sort of the top of the funnel. It's just to get churches
Mm-hmm.
engaged. And then we can help the churches who think they're just putting on an event to understand what is discipleship and how do we move our men and get them engaged. And so,
Yeah.
we've just seen remarkable things happening all over the world.
Wow, that's so exciting. What have you seen in the shift when from the early days of working with men and men's leaders to today? Where have you seen the shifts, whether it's in culture or in church culture or in men themselves? What have you observed?
Yeah, I think there's a number of paradigm shifts that we've seen in the area of ministry to men and in men. I think in the early days, when I think back to the 90s, for example, a lot of ministry to men was based on events, and so churches were constantly and organizations were doing a lot of events, and it was sort of that if you build it, they will come type philosophy, and if you put on the event, then guys would come, and there were a lot of great events that took place, and I still believe in events, but I think there's not nearly the emphasis. I think there's a much heavier emphasis on the relationship and relationships, whether in getting guys connected in small groups and getting in the community, a greater emphasis just on one-on-one mentoring
Mm-hmm.
versus the larger gatherings. And so I think that's one big transition that we've seen from events to relationship. I think another major transition or paradigm shift that we've seen over the years is from information to transformation.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are a lot of boomers really just love to study and they love to read books and they just wanted to sort of fill their brains with more and more and more information. And I think what we're seeing today is we're saying, and people are realizing it's not just the amount of information you have, not knowing all the stories or memorizing all the verses, but is my life being changed? What am I doing with my faith? And you see the younger generation really pushing that towards some really important justice issues and saying we want to make a difference with the homeless issue, with the illiteracy and in different things like that, and saying we want to make a difference. We want to do something about our faith and make it alive, and so that's another transition paradigm shift
Mm-hmm.
that we've seen. I think another big one is people just do not have the time they had. Before, people would go to church on a Sunday morning. They might be involved in one or two small groups and an activity. And guys just are not willing to give that to you anymore. If you get one thing out of a guy now, that's big during the week because of all the different ways he's being pulled and things like that. And then a final one I'll mention. There's a bunch. I got a whole talk on this, but another one is technology. Everything
Yeah.
used to be paper, and your Bible studies, your Bible, everything was paper, and now it's digital, and so even the studies that we've produced, our base camp Bible studies, they're all digital. It can be done on the phone or the iPad or the computer, and that's the way guys want it. And you're using shorter clips than you would have in the past. So those are just a few of the changes
Yeah.
that I've seen. But yeah, at the same time, men are men, and I've seen men are still struggling with the same things, and in a lot of ways, just being personal and relational with a guy is still what's most important.
Those are just tremendous insights. If you were to boil down, say, the greatest challenge currently when it comes to advancing ministry to men on at a local church or generally, what would you say the greatest challenge you see today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think again, there's been a lot of changes in churches, and I believe in the church. I've been involved in the church, in working with the church for 40 years. I'm still preaching and involved in the local church. I think some of the challenges that the churches are facing, I think, is the time thing, is families just being pulled in so many directions, and so a lot of churches are going to a simple church model. They're just doing one thing, family ministry. And so in a lot of churches, ministry to men does not have a very high emphasis. Less than 5% of churches in North America have a ministry to men. And so when you think about that, that's huge. And so I think a lot of pastors are struggling and wondering, how do I work with all these guys, all these men in my church? What does that look like? And so there's the lack of knowledge of how to do it. There's a lack of emphasis on actually seeing it as important. And so I think both those things come into play as we work with churches, and just a lot of, I think, leaders not knowing the difference that it can make. When I talk to a pastor and I just have coffee or lunch, I say, listen, would you like to have men at your church who are emotionally healthy, who are spiritually growing, who are relationally committed, who are kingdom mobilized? Would you like that? And of course they go, well, yeah. Where do I find that person? I said, well, that's what a ministry to men can do, is you can do all those things and more. And so I think it's just helping, in my mind. I having been involved in this for over 30 years now, I feel like I just need to be constantly casting that vision and helping pastors and leaders understand the importance and what it will really do for your church and the impact it will make in families, in volunteerism. Just, a couple of years ago, we got a new children's pastor, and she started on Sunday, and she went around, she visited all the rooms. We had 3 services, I don't know how many classes, probably 100 classes, children's ministry classes. And she came to me on Monday at staff meeting. She goes, Steve, what happened here? I go, what do you mean? And she goes, we have more men serving in children's ministry than women. She goes, I've been in children's ministry for 20 years. I've never seen anything like that before. And I asked them all how they got started. And they said, well, they were discipled in the ministry to men. And that's what the ministry to men is. It's the minor leagues of the church. We're producing volunteers and leaders for the rest of the church. I don't care where guys serve. I really don't. Probably not the women's ministry, but anywhere else, it's fine. But it's just, that's what a ministry to men can do. It can just produce leaders and volunteers for a church. You're going to see guys come to Christ. A man comes to Christ through another man. And so you're going to see a ton of guys come to Christ. You're going to see them go deep with Jesus. I mean, I could go on forever, but yeah, a lot of great stuff's going to happen. But I think it's helping pastors understand that, to answer your question.
Yeah. That is, you actually led it right into my next question, because I've been around the church ministries world for so long, and it seems like all the other ministries of the church take higher priority, and in some ways for good reason, but men's ministry is often the lowest on the priority list, and yet there are such huge rewards that you just articulated so well for churches and pastors and leadership pipelines and discipleship. So for the men's leader, or for the local pastor out there who is overwhelmed and just has a lack of volunteers, what encouragement would you give them to just begin to think about beginning a ministry to men, and where to begin?
Yeah. Well, obviously there's a couple things I would do. I think I would find a point person. If I was a pastor of a church and with so many balls up in the air. I would try to find just a point person that would say, I have a passion for this. I have an interest in this. And the point person that would really be the champion for it. Um, and then to have that point person build a team, to get two or three other guys on that team to do it together. What we have seen, Dean, over the years, and this is now over 30 years of experience from this, if it's just one guy, you're going to have a start and a stop so often. And that's what really scares senior pastors so often, is that they've seen it happen. A guy comes in, gets all excited, gets something going, and then he gets transferred, or he gets another passion or interest, and then the pastor's left holding the ball. And but if you build a team, and that is really, really critical. You have a point person, and they have a team, and they do it together. And I'm not saying you have to have 12 guys; just get two or three guys that say, "Yeah, we're going to do this together," and then you just sort of develop a plan. And I know that you guys are putting on this leadership summit coming up, and we're going to talk about that later. But there's a lot of good materials out there. I wrote a book years ago, How to Build a Life-Changing Men's Ministry, that still has a lot of traction and just great principles on getting started. We do leadership cohorts that they could be a part of. But I think it's just getting that person, getting that team, and starting small and go slow. This is not a race. Just start with a small group this fall. And just get a small group together and just get started, and maybe read something together about small groups or ministry to men, and just take the next 6 months, 9 months, and sort of get to know each other, become to one another what you want the men in the church to be. And so I always encourage churches, build your leadership team, take 6 months to 9 months to really just become a small group. Start to do your planning, put together your purpose statement, your plan, and then start something small, and then slowly grow it over time. It's not a race. This is a marathon.
That's right.
So if you want just a couple things, that's what I would say.
Yeah.
Is what I would do.
Well, that's so good. Let me just go a little deeper then for the church that does have a men's ministry, and it's been going for a while, and I've seen this trend that often it can trend to become very insular, and it just becomes a small group or a small group of the same guys for a long time.
Yeah.
What have you seen most effective to get guys to be missionally minded, just focused on the guys in their community, just making an impact and a difference beyond just being in a country club environment?
Yeah, exactly. And that is very, very common, unfortunately. And I think just like the church can do the same thing, right? The church can sort of circle the wagons and have the country club mentality. Matter of fact, we know from all the studies over the last 50 years that for the evangelical church, 80% of our resources go for the already convinced. They go towards either establishing believers or equipping. Very little money goes towards evangelism or developing leadership. And so you have to really be intentional about it. And so what would I do, or what do I encourage churches to do? It starts with the leadership, again, with that leadership team of having a vision that's bigger than themselves. And so what we do is we do a simple assessment, and we give churches an assessment and just help them see where they're at as far as their leadership team is concerned, as far as service, as far as evangelism, as far as small groups, and how well-rounded are you? And then really encouraging them to say, okay, in this coming year, what are some things you can do to really move out of your comfort zone? So, for example, if you have guys that are just meeting together and they're not including others and not being outward faced, go through a study on evangelism together. And I just written a new course called Disciple Maker 101. And that's what it is: how every man can make an impact in their world. How do you write your testimony? How do you share your faith? How do you engage the culture? How do you start a new small group? To do something like that, there's a lot of other resources out there. But to really talk about it, and to study it, and then to expect it. When you're, as a leader, if you're going to change culture, you have to embody it. And so, are you doing it? Jimmy Carter, right? maybe more known more for what he did after his presidency than during his presidency. And whenever you saw Jimmy Carter, he was on a rooftop pounding nails for Habitat for Humanity, and he
Hmm.
didn't have a suit on. He had his jeans on, his overalls, and a belt around his waist with a hammer, a saw, and the nails. And he embodied Habitat for Humanity. That's what we need
Yeah.
to do, leader. If we're not doing it, if we're not serving the poor, if we're not sharing our faith, we can't expect others to do it. So really, I really say, listen, it starts with leadership. Don't expect from others what you're not doing yourself.
That's good. I love that. So another big passion of ours has been, how do we engage the next generation of men? So what have you seen to
Yeah.
be some of the ways that we can be effective to reach younger men and pull them into these kinds of ministries where they can grow and be discipled?
Yeah, yeah. I'll tell you right now, there is a great movement going on among the 20-somethingers, and you talk to the specialists in young adult ministry and youth ministry, and in men's. You're just seeing this surge of young people that are very excited about Christianity, and I really believe they're going to be taking the mantle of leadership into the future. And but they're a different tribe, and it's going to look ministry is going to look
Hmm.
different than it did before. And I just had some serious conversations. I'll tell you. I'll just give you this, Dean. It was so exciting. I had conversations with the head of discipleship for Campus Crusade for Christ, or crew now as they go, with the head of Navigators Discipleship Ministries, and the guy in charge of, or the woman in charge of InterVarsity's Discipleship Ministries. And I asked him, I said, what are you learning from college students? Because I figured whatever they're learning is going to be apply to ministry to men, right? And it was unanimous what they said. And they're doing new stuff all over the country and all over the world. And they said, to a T, they said, just imagine a young man coming into your church and he's got a post-it note on his forehead that says, mentor me. And they are looking for that one-on-one relationship. They're not even as interested in the small group as much as they are in the one-on-one mentoring relationship. Now they are interested in community and they want that, but they want that one-on-one, and this is a great opportunity for the older men of our churches to reach back and not invite them. The problem we have, of course, is that so much of our ministry to men today is being planned by boomers, and they're doing things that boomers are interested in. They're not planning it with the young man in mind. So there's a couple applications. One, start meeting them one-on-one, because that's what they want. Just go up to a guy on a Sunday morning after church, before church, and say, listen, Bill, hey, I would love to hear your story. I would love to get to know you. And as a ministry, develop just a small team of guys that are just going to start to meet one-on-one with younger men. And don't expect anything from them other than you're just paying the tab for breakfast, for lunch, for coffee, and just ask them some questions and just get to know them. Allow them
Mm-hmm.
a chance to ask you questions. And it'll be, and it's not a weekly commitment. Maybe you do one a month. And I'll tell you, you will have a huge impact, and you'll have a line of guys waiting to meet with you. But the mentoring piece is gigantic. So that's a key thing. The second thing is they're not into the events, and so they don't want, bigger is not better to them, where it was for boomers, right? And so we really need to understand that. A second application would be is maybe to find one or two guys and get them on your leadership team and allow them to help you formulate what you want to do and how you're going to minister to the men. So it's not just focused on the older guys, but really has a younger man focus as well. So just a couple
Wow.
quick applications there.
This is like a masterclass on ministry to men. I love it.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, this is great. That's why all these conversations.
So, Steve, we're so excited to have you join us again at our Men's Ministry Leadership Summit in September. It's a virtual event, and it's going to be free of charge to any men's leaders out there. We've taken the theme about thinking differently, and we just want men's leaders to think differently about ministry to men. And so we're going to focus on some key areas. I believe you're going to be talking to us about thinking deeper about ministry to men. You want to give us a little preview of some of the things that the Lord has kind of laid on your heart for that session and where you're going to take the men?
What the Lord's laying on my heart is I don't know where I'm going to be able to do this in 12 minutes. That's my thing. I'm filming it next week, and um, I'm doing this session tomorrow for about 35 international guests. And but what I'm going to do, if there's one message I'm going to get across, is maybe two messages. But the first message is, don't worry about numbers. Do not worry about numbers. We live in a society that is just obsessed with numbers, and everything's got to be going up and to the right. And Jesus was never concerned with numbers. I tell guys all the time, if you have more than 11 in your ministry, you're doing better than Jesus. And the point is that Jesus is our model of ministry to men.
Yeah.
Jesus was the best men's ministry leader ever. And he provides not only teaching on what it means to be a follower of Jesus, but he provides a model on what ministry to men is to look like. And so you ask, what am I going to get to? One of the big topics is I want to just help the guys relax and say, listen, I'm not getting 50 guys, 100 guys, 1,000 guys to my events. Don't worry. Do not worry about numbers, because Jesus never was. He was here for 3 years and he ended up with 11 guys. So don't worry about numbers. Go slow, start small. Just get a handful of guys together. Get 3 to 5 guys and just start meeting with them and say, hey, would you guys meet for 3 months? And just pick a time, pick a place, pick a topic, pick your guys, and go. That's it. And so I'm going to talk about that, and I'm going to talk about that more time spent with a fewer amount of men equals greater impact for the kingdom of God. That's going to be my message. More time. I love it. With fewer men equals greater impact for the kingdom. And that'll be my thesis. And then I'll just give you some very practical tips on how do you identify the men to build into, and what are some ways you can invest your life in their life, and then what are some things you can actually do when you meet together. But just sort of giving them just the basics, and then I'll point them obviously to some other resources if they want the full deal down the road.
That's so good. I'm looking forward to your talk, and I hope every men's leader, pastor gets a chance to tune in. It'll be available. Just check out our website. You'll find all the details there a little later this summer. Steve, what final word of encouragement would you give to the men's leader or pastor out there today who's listening to this and feels like, they're not getting those numbers? They feel a little discouraged. They're looking at the fall that's coming down, and they want to relaunch. And what would you say to them today, just to say, let's do this again?
Yeah, I would say to the pastors out there, to the small group leaders, the high capacity volunteers, whoever's listening, and has a heart for ministry to men, to let you know it's worth it. It is worth it. The time you're investing, the planning, the prayer, the conversations, the middle of the night phone conversations, that coffee with a guy, with a student, with a young man, it's worth it. Is that the only way our world will be changed is one man at a time, and each one of us is put in a certain place for such a time as this. And the studies show us that every single man has about 154 people in their sphere of influence. And so just start with who you are. Who you are as a man makes a difference. And the guys of your church and community work are watching you. And as you meet with guys one-on-one, as you encourage them, as you pray for them, as you spend time with them, you are making a difference in their life that you may not even know till you get to heaven. But it is worth it, because men's lives will be changed, character will be formed, relationships will be healed, marriages will be reconciled, children will come back home, and life will be different as you invest in the men of your church and community. It's worth it.
Oh, So good. So good. Well, Steve, before I let you go, I teed you up to do a little speed round here to end on a light note. And so this will give us a little more insight into Steve Sonderman and who he really is. So you already alluded to this, but tell us your favorite team and sport. You already identified what geographic location they're in, but
Yeah.
favorite sport, favorite team.
Well, I think I have to say the Milwaukee Brewers. I have been the chaplain for the
Okay.
Brewers for the last 10 years, and so I have a special affinity with them.
Very cool. What's your favorite way to recharge your own personal batteries?
Reading. I just love to
Oh,
read,
good.
and so I read.
Okay.
I read a lot of biographies, autobiographies, but I love to read.
Well, that leads into my next question. So, what's the most impactful book you've read in the last year?
Oh, in the last year. Oh gosh, I try to read 2 books a month. That's sort of my goal. I would say in the last year, the one that really hit me was the book on Tim Keller. And a matter of fact, I was reading it when he died, and it was
Wow.
his story. And what I loved about the book is, I think it's just called Keller, but it's about his theological and spiritual formation. It's not like just his whole story, but really how he was formed as a man theologically and spiritually. And it really impacted me.
Yeah. And he impacted so many people. Such
Yep.
a great story.
Yeah.
Favorite passage of scripture or your go to verse?
Yep.
What
Yeah.
would it be?
I'll give you two. Philippians 1:21, for me to live is Christ and to die is gain, is my life verse. My ministry verse is 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 8. Paul says, I was not just, I didn't come just to share the gospel, but I came to share my life with you as well.
Good.
And it's just
Love
life on life.
Love it. Last question. If you could meet one Bible character for coffee and not Jesus on this list, but who would that Bible character be?
Yeah, I would. It would be Paul. I love Paul's passion.
Okay.
I love Paul's risk taking, adventure. Yeah, I'd probably say Paul.
Well, that's a good pick.
Yeah, there's a lot of good picks. There's a lot of good picks. I don't know if anyone would say, well, that's a bad pick, but yeah.
That's right. That's right. No, you can't go wrong with the Apostle Paul. Steve, this has been wonderful. Thank you for taking time to share with our audience today. We are so excited that you're going to be with us in September at the Leadership Summit. And guys, please check out the summit, but also No Regrets Men's Ministry. Steve, where can guys go to get more information about No Regrets or to follow you?
Yeah. So just go to noregretsmen.org. noregretsmen.org. And on our website, you'll find all the stuff, the resources for training, for discipleship, the conference, everything. That'd just be the one place to go. noregretsmen.org.
So good. Thank you again, Steve. It's been a delight to have you with us. I look forward to connecting with you many more times in the future.
Great, Dean. This has been wonderful. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Impactus podcast. To learn more about living a life of purpose and godly impact, check out impactus.org.